All right, welcome to Basics of Biblical Hebrew, chapter 14b. We'll finish up chapter 14 today. That's about call perfect weak verbs. So we'll begin with the Hebrew insight, and then we'll have the call perfect weak verbs, and then we'll go over the vocabulary. I think we went over last time. We can go over it again. I think we'll have time for that. We talked last time about the Hebrew word shamar, which means to keep or protect or guard, that sort of thing. And in Psalm 121, that's the one that starts off, it's a song for the going ups or song of ascents. I will lift up the eyes of me to the mountains from where it comes the help of me. Okay, that's kind of a famous one. But in this short psalm, only 8 verses, 6 times we have shamar. So I've highlighted them here, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just looking at, like in verse 3, we have, shamar over here. And get rid of that so we can see the vowels. And so this would be not he will give to be moved the feet of you, not he will slumber the one keeping you. Keeping of you. There's a pronominal suffix. The next verse, behold, not he slumbers and not he sleeps, the one keeping Israel. Next verse, Yahweh is the one keeping you. Again, there's that pronominal suffix. That O vowel here, when you look at that, you say, is that a seen or a sheen? Because we've got 2 dots. Well, it's the sheen, and that other dot on the left, that's actually the O vowel. Tells you this is a participle. So the one keeping you. And then down to verse 7, Yahweh, he will keep you from all evil. He will keep the soul of you. And then the last line, Yahweh, he will keep your goings out, the goings out of you, and the coming ins of you from now as far as forever. So anyway, just interesting to see that and know that when he's keeping us, that means he's guarding us, he's protecting us. And I find that comforting. All right, now we'll do a quick review on, we'll start chapter 14b, but we're going to begin 14b by doing a bit of a review on what we covered last week or last session. And we'll, just as a reminder, verbal stems means gives us the voice and the action. For instance, the type of action, it could be simple action, causative action, intensive action, and the voice is active, passive, or reflexive. Active means the subject's doing the action. Passive means the action is happening to the subject. Reflexive means that the subject is doing something that affects themselves. For instance, active, I usually identify, that's the subject is doing something. Passive, the action is happening to the subject. Reflexive, kind of does a U-turn. Subject is affected by it. So active, he hid something. Passive, he was hidden. Reflexive, he hid himself. Okay, and we describe the types of action and the voice, how that action's related to the subject. We differentiate those in Hebrew by the stems. And so each stem carries a different voice and action. And we are concentrating on call. We'll eventually get to the others. The nice thing is, whenever you whenever we get to like the knee fall and the he feel and the ho fall, notice the knee fall actually does double duty here. PL, pual, and heat palel. When we get to those, you'll find that all the stuff that we've learned for the call is still there. It's still the same. There are other changes that take place. And so in the call, we have our major memorizations, and the rest of them is just learning about how they are altered. So this is why they say that when you learn Hebrew, you start off crying and end up laughing, because once you've got some of the basics down, it carries with you through the rest of the course. So as a call perfect Call is a simple action. It's active action, an active simple action, and perfect means it's completed action. So we have Allah, he went up. Of course, there's no subformative on the back of this. So this is the third masculine singular. He went up. All right. This will primarily be a review. We did this last week too. Almost everything we do will be applying things you've already learned, which is the call perfect strong verb paradigm. Very important to have that memorized. Identifying weak verbs, that's not too hard either. And then the syllabification rules that we learned back in chapter 3. So start off with a strong verb paradigm, call perfect. That's in 13.5 on page 131. It's interesting because the imperfect, when we do that, that'll be in chapter 15, it'll be 15.3. So you have these two numbers switch places, 15.3 instead of 13.5. That's just kind of, I don't know, the way the book turned out. And so it looks like this. We don't have to turn there right now. This is the way it's in the book. I'm going to go to the next one. Notice this is in 3, 2, 1 order, singular, 3, 2, 1 plural. My brain doesn't work that way. And so this is the way I memorized it. So we'll just run through it because it's important to get these. The subformatives are in red. And of course, they're isolated over here by themselves. Catalti, catalta, catalt, catal, catala, catalnu, cataltem, catalten, catalu. So that gives us all the person, first, second, third person, singular and plural. And it's imperative to learn this because these subformatives are going to be with us for the rest of the book. We'll need to know those for every single. We don't have to rememorize them. Once we have them in the call, those same subformatives will be there when we look at a he feel perfect or a PL perfect or something else. That will not change. That's why it's so imperative to get that down now. So that's the call perfect strong verb paradigm. Then identifying weak verbs. We know that there's letters that drop out. The yod, vav, nun, hey will drop out. We also know we have gutturals are part of weak verbs, weak verbs. There's aleph, hey, het, ayin, and also sometimes resh is treated as a guttural. For instance, it won't take a dagesh. And then there are also weak verbs that are biconsonantal. We'll talk about that today. Geminate, we'll talk about that today. They're also considered weak. And then sometimes we'll also look at doubly weak, where you have two weak letters in a word or in a root. Weak verbs can have weak consonants in the first position. We call this R1, like this ayin. That's a guttural. He stood, amad, he stood. It can be in the second position, like bachar. We have this chet here. It's in the second R2, we call it. It's R1, R2. Because this R is for root, in the second letter. It can be in the third position. In this case, is a 3 aleph, matzah, he found. And we can have more than one position, and I mentioned that we have doubly weak. We have an ayin and a 3 hey. So we got a one guttural, and a 3 hey. He went up, Allah. And so that's identifying weak verbs, and then the syllabification rules. We'll just review those quickly. Gutturals cannot take a vocal schwa. That was back in chapter 3.6. But they prefer the reduced A vowel. That's still back in chapter 3. So we have this het, and instead of a vocal schwa, we get a reduced patak. A schwa is silent if the previous vowel is short, a short vowel. In most other circumstances, it's vocal. That was also back in chapter 3. So we have ba with the patak. That's the short A vowel. We have be with the segol. That's the short E vowel. We have b. that's the Pyrrhic, and it's the short I vowel. Bo, that's a comet satuf, and so it's actually the O sound. Bo, that's the short O sound, and then boo, that's the kibbutz, and we have the short U vowel. So when if schwa is following any of those, it's going to be a silent schwa. And there is an exception. If the schwa is at the end of the word, it is also silent. Again, all of this is from chapter 3. So now we'll move on from that review. Now we want to specifically review what we looked at for weak verbs last week. So we're going to review call weak verbs part 1. This will be shorter. We're just going to fly through them as a reminder. The review of part A, we had 1 gutturals and 2 gutturals, weak verbs. We had the 3 chet ayin, we had the 3 alepphs, and we had the 3 hays. And when we looked at those, it's exactly like what we said so far. We're applying things we've already learned. And the perfect subformatives, this is important. The perfect subformatives, when you learn that paradigm that's in 13.5, those subformatives do not change. Do not change. It doesn't say usually don't change. It doesn't say sometimes or whatever. It's they don't change. They do not change, and that's heartening. You don't have to. That's encouraging. You don't have to relearn them every time we look at something new. Once you have them, we'll be using them for the rest of the book. And the imperfects will be the same way. And that'll be the last big memorization effort. Of course, you still have to memorize vocabulary and need to learn variations, but the call perfect paradigm and the call imperfect paradigm are the last 2 really big memorization efforts beyond, the vocabulary and the changes, because they don't change. So 1 gutturals and 2 gutturals, all of the changes to 1 gutturals and 2 guttural verbs are because gutturals can't take a vocal schwa. That was in the 14.2. So we have katal tem. Now, katal is not a weak, there's no weak letters in there. There's no dageshes. That's the strong paradigm that we learned. Katal tem, that means you all killed, talking to men. That's second masculine plural. You all killed. Katal tem. And so when we have a 1 guttural, here's an ayin in the R1 position, it doesn't have this vocal schwa. Katalta or kataltem, kataltem. Here we have amad tem. Notice that the tems stay the same. That doesn't change. The subformative doesn't change. But the gutturals take a reduced A vowel instead of the vocal schwa. Right there, the reduced patak in this case, amad tem. That means you all stood, by the way. You all stood. There's only one change to the to the 3 chet ayin verbs. This will be in the second feminine singular. So when we see this, here's the subformative for second feminine singular. That's katal. That's the one we memorize. Katalt. Katalt. So we want to put in a word with a 3 chet or ayin in there. So we have the ayin, and we notice that the chet ayin letters are hard to pronounce at the end of words, so they often add an A vowel, and that's what we get. Shama'at. Shama'at. That's the you heard talking to a woman. You heard. Going on back to the review of the 3 alephs. 3 aleph changes. All the changes to 3 alephs are due to the fact that the aleph is silent. So we have a comparison here of katal tem, you all killed, and here's matzah, you all found. The aleph doesn't get the, I'll just do it this way. The silent schwa under the aleph, quiescent aleph drops out. You don't need a silent schwa on a silent letter. It makes absolutely no sound at all. Now the short vowel before the quiescent aleph lengthens. So instead of the patak, like we have in katal, we have the comets under the tzad. And the dagesh lene after the quiescent aleph drops out. So we lose that, but it's still easy to see tem and tem, and that's the second masculine plural. Formative. So this is you all killed and you all found. I think I said that already. Then three hays. Three hays are different because they're actually three yod verbs, and the yod will show back up again. So again, comparing that to katal tem, we take bana. Here's the three hay. It's in the third position there. Three hay. Bana. That's not a yellow fruit that grows on a tree. A banana. That'd be a banana. That'd be build please. Na means please, or now. Build now. Bana. So we have the hay, and it's replaced by it goes back to being the three yod again. So we get that here yod in there. Beneath tem. All of the first and second person forms retain the three yod. Let me see there. And the dagesh lene after the vowel drops out of the tem, out of the tav in the subformative. So anyway, this will be you all built, you all built, you all killed, you all built. You notice that the tem looks the same, except this one doesn't have the dagesh, but it's still easy to see that is a second masculine plural. Each third person form reacts differently. So looking at that, as I said, the three hay verbs are really three yod verbs. The third feminine singular form has a comets hay ending. It's not a part of the three-letter root, but and then the third feminine singular form, the hay before doesn't go to a yod. It actually goes to the feminine tav. And that's not unusual to us. We've seen that with other things. And then the third common plural, in the perfect, there's no separate one for masculine and feminine, so it's common. Third common plural loses the hirik yod because you can't have two vowels in a row, because the next vowel would actually be a shurik with the third common plural. Oops, there. So you can't have two vowels in a row. So the hirik yod drops out. So that pretty much brings us up to where we left off last time. Now we want to be able to recognize perfect, call perfect geminate verbs. Geminate, you might recognize that means twin. We're actually going to be looking at today the geminate, the doubly weak, and the biconsonantal. All right. Learning the rules is easier than memorizing paradigms. We don't have to go through and memorize all the different forms. We just need to realize what's happening and recognize what's there. And the encouraging thing is that the perfect subformatives do not change. Do not change. So when it comes to the geminate paradigms, we have the geminate strong, the geminate weak 1 and weak 2. Look on 14.8, which is on page 146. And when you look at the chart at the bottom of 146, let's just start at the top. The third masculine singular, there are no subformatives. And you see savav. Now, savav is going to mean he's surrounded. All right. And then the Tom is going to be finished, completed, something like that. And then we have the call strong, which is what we memorize, but there's no subformative on third masculine singular. Drop down to the third feminine singular. We see the comets hey, all the way across, no change. Second masculine singular, you see ta, ta, ta. Second feminine, we see the tav. It doesn't have the shva, but it still finishes with the tav, so it's still feminine. In the strong, we do have the shva under there. So there's a little bit of difference. We still see the tav ending. It didn't go away. It just doesn't have the shva. The next one down, first common singular, T, 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 no change. Third common plural, oo, 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 no change. Second person masculine plural, tem, 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 no change. Second feminine plural, ten, ten, 10. No change, except we're missing some dog eshes. Well, in second masculine too, missing some dog eshes. But the subformatives are still easily recognizable. And then the last line, we have new, new, and new. So this is, it's important to be able to know what changes and what doesn't change. All right. Now we'll talk about that in some detail here. All changes to geminate verbs are because two like consonants, two of the same letter, usually combine. So we have savav, as I said, that means he's surrounded. And so that becomes sab. We have the dagesh here telling us that there's two baits, which is what we have here. All right. The remaining consonant usually takes a dagesh forte. We're going to see an exception to this. So with this, in this case, we say usually takes a dagesh forte. A connecting vowel is added before the first and second person subformatives. So we get sabo. You want to split the syllables slow motion. And there's no dagesh linea in the subformative. And so that becomes sabotem. And again, we have no problem recognize that as saying second person masculine plural with a tem ending. The subformative didn't change. We don't have the dagesh. It's still easy to recognize it. And that's the important thing. The first vowel is short because the syllable is closed. Okay. So that's why we have a patak there as opposed to this comments that we originally started out with. Okay, and then compare that to katal tem, and we see that we have a difference in the dagesh and the patak. We have the connecting vowel, the O vowel, the holem vav, but the subformative is the same. Okay, now we'll look at R. This is the Hebrew word for pirate. No, I'm just making it up. That's not what it is. Actually, it's kind of close in that it means curse, but it doesn't mean pirate. But that's what pirates are supposed to say, R. So we have a geminate. We have two of the same letters right in a row here, two ratios, but we have a problem here. R, okay, we said a little bit ago the remaining consonant usually takes the dagesh forte. However, we got a problem. What's wrong with this? The resh cannot take a dagesh. Gutturals and resh cannot take a dagesh, so that goes away. Okay. So we're going to scratch that rule out for this one because it's, and the same would be true for a, we had two gutturals in a row word. So a connecting vowel is still added for the first, second person subformatives. So we get RO, and there's no dagesh linea in the subformative. We're going to add tem again, and there's no dagesh there. So we get RO tem, y'all cursed. The first vowel is long because the syllable is open. Because if you're going to divide the syllables, it's ro, tem. So this initial letter is now an open syllable. That's why we get the long vowel. But again, a lot of this that we're looking at for weak verbs is to be able to recognize what the word is. It's more important that from that angle, maybe, than what it is for the subformatives, because they don't change. Okay, yeah, there's the long one. All right. So that's geminate. Now we're going to look at doubly weak verbs and some notes on that. The same characteristics we've seen in the three hey are present, along with expected behaviors in accordance with the rules for the gutturals, shva, and dagesh. So there's nothing new to learn here, and the perfect subformatives do not change. You might seem like I'm hammering on that, but it's just important and encouraging to know that once you've learned the paradigm, whether you do the one in 13.5 or whether you do the one that I sent out that has everything in first, second, third person order, you have to memorize one of those. So we want to look at the doubly weak paradigm on page 148, 14.10. And again, if we just do a quick review, we go up to the top, we see that the whole row, that's third masculine singular, there's no, whether it's ra'ah, Allah, or katal, there's no subformative, that's third masculine singular. Then when we drop down to the next line, the third feminine singular, we see the comets hey, comets hey, comets hey, all the way across. When we, of course, strong, the right column is the, right-hand column is the strong verb, which is the one we memorize, okay. Next line down, second masculine singular, ta, ta, ta. The dagesh is missing, but we still see ta. We still recognize that as second masculine singular. Next line down, second feminine. We have the feminine tav and the feminine tav. We don't have the shva. We do have that in the strong. So that's a little bit of a difference, but it's not a big difference. Next line down, first common singular, t, t, t. We're missing some dageshes, but it's pronounced the same, and it's easily to see that T ending in its first common singular. Third common plural, oo, oo, oo. Now the shurik at the end of each one of those, no change. Second masculine plural, tem, tem, tem. The only change is lacking a dagesh. On the second feminine plural, we have 10, 10, 10. And again, the only thing is the change in the dagesh, but it's still easy to see that is second feminine plural with a 10 subformative. And then the last line, first common plural, see new, new, and new. Easy. If you have it memorized, it's easy. Okay, so that's doubly weak. And we need to be able to recognize the call perfect biconsonantal verbs. So that's the next one. That's on page 148 and 49. The chart is on 149. That starts the section on 148. But again, if we just go through and look at the biconsonantal strong and weak, well, let's look at the chart first. I'll go back to this. Let's just look at the chart on page 159 or 49 rather, 149. And the same thing, third masculine singular, we do not expect to see a subformative, and we don't. All we see is kom, sam, ba. I say kom, it makes a difference on whether it's accented or not. But anyway, there's no subformative on it. Go to the next line down, third feminine. We see comets hey, comets hey, comets hey. Easy. Second masculine singular, ta, ta, ta. Now the weak, we don't have a dagesh, but that's also easy to see. It's the same. Second feminine singular, we have the tav with the shva, tav with the shva, tav without a shva. And then, of course, in the strong, I haven't been reading the strong verbs, but we have it. We're on the far right-hand side. First common singular, t, t, t. The weak doesn't have a dagesh, but that's why does it not have a dagesh? Because the aleph acquiesces, quiescent, yeah, it's quiescent. So that's how we, but it's still obviously when you see the T, that's first common singular. Third common plural, oo, oo, oo. We have shuriks across the board here. Second masculine plural, tem, 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 tem. All the way across, one's missing, the weak one's missing the dagesh. Second feminine plural, 10, 10, 10, 10. Same thing. The weak one is missing the dagesh because we have a silent aleph in front of it. The first common plural, new, 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 new. So again, this is really, really easy to identify the person and number of the verb. Biconsonantal verbs are really two yod, two vav verbs. These are sometimes called hollow verbs, and I should probably put that in here. Sometimes I kind of like the word hollow because they drop out. But technically they're two vav, two yod verbs. And so what do we know about yod and vav? Well, that's a part of the 4 letters that drop out. They like to drop out. There they go. And so the biconsonantals are really 2 vav, 2 yod, and it's going to drop out. So we have cum. That's he arose, or he raised, or something like that. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. And the vav and yod in the second position drop out in all the call perfect forms. So we end up with com or comb, depending upon if it's accented or not. So that's the third masculine singular. How do we know? There's no subformative back here. All right. So that's the third masculine singular. And on the other hand, we have the second masculine singular. We still have the com, but we still have the ta subformative. We know that's the second masculine singular. So it'd be you raised, as opposed to he raised. The third person forms inflect like second letter is missing. Okay. So here's katal, the one we memorized for the paradigm. And when you, for the biconsonantal, it's like that tet goes away. And what we see is the first and last letter, and the first letter has a comments. So that's what it looks like. And the first and second person forms inflect like the first letter is missing. What does that mean? Well, here's katal ta. That's you killed, still second masculine singular. You can see they have matching subformatives here. And over here, you see there's no subformative on that one. That's third masculine singular. And so look at the vowels, though. Well, next step here. We remove the first letter, and you can see it's katak, shva, comments. Katak, shva, comments. And so that's what we mean when we say that's like it's missing the letter. We're talking about the vowel pattern here. Okay. Let's take a look at so there's a summary chart on page 151. It's got a summary of all of them that we've looked at. The changes are identified in red, and we want to be aware of what can change. We need to be aware of what does not change. So just looking at all the different weak verb forms, we got 1 guttural, 2 guttural, so forth across the top. The last column is actually the strong. That's the strong verb paradigm that we should have memorized. Okay. And if you just go across the top, that's the third. If you want to write it in next to it, that's third masculine singular. It's the same order they go in the book. They didn't change anything on that. You see no subformative at all. All right. Drop down to the next line. That's third feminine singular. We see the comments A, all the way across. You have the comments A. That's easy. Next line down is second masculine singular. You see ta, 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 all the way across. Whether it's got a dogash or not, it's easy to see that's second masculine singular. Next line down is second feminine singular. You see the tav with a shva, tav with a shva, tav with a shva, the tav without a shva, tav without a shva, tav without a shva. But you have that feminine tav ending, whether it's got a shva or not, whether it's got a dogash or not. It's still easy to see the second feminine singular. Next line down, T, 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 all the way across. It's easy to see that's first common singular. Sometimes we have a dogash, sometimes we don't. The third common plural is next, and every one of them ends with a shurrik that never ever changes throughout. Next one down, a second masculine plural. I don't know if I said the one previous line, third common plural. I'm not sure if I said that right. Now we're on second masculine plural. We see tem, 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 all the way across. Might have a dogash, might not. There's a reason why it doesn't. If you go back to the rules, the pronunciation rules, the guttural rules, and so forth, schwa rules. The next one down is feminine, second feminine plural. We see 10, 10, 10, 10, all the way across. So once and then finally we have the first common plural, and we see new, 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 all the way across. And so once you've learned the paradigm, you're able to easily see whether it's first, second, or third person, whether it's singular. Matt? whether it's first, second, or third person, whether it's masculine, feminine, or common, or whether it's singular or plural. I did want to highlight, if you go to the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line down, that's the one common singular, first person common singular, and under the biconsonantal, bicon heading there, it looks like it's a serre. Does yours look like that? Okay, that is a printing error. That is not a serre, it's actually supposed to be a heric. If you go back previous, flip one page back to 149, and you look at the biconsonantal first common singular, you'll see it's a heric yod. So that they've got an extra dot in there, it's a misprint. Okay, so having gone through that, if you just kind of scan down through their first gutturals, well, you see you have a guttural, and so you get a reduced vowel instead of a vocal schwa on two of them. And two guttural, you get, reduced vowels. So this is all easy to see what it is that changes. The third ket ayin, you have an A vowel under the ayin, under the second feminine singular. Again, it's just pretty easy to see and understand what it is we're looking at. And the three aleph, notice that the main change is that we have a comets in there. Why do we have a comets? Is because the vowel under the tzadeh lengthens because the aleph quiesces. All right. And then we don't have to go through every single one of these, but you'll see we talked about connecting vowels. We talked about three hays are really three odes, and so there's things that are predictable in here. But this is a good chart to be encouraged to see that it really is not too hard. If you've learned the call perfect strong paradigm in chapter 13, chapter 14 is just a matter of applying stuff that we've already learned, not a lot of other memorization to take place. So we've covered all that. Let's go ahead. We've got our page open to 151. Let's just make a quick review of the vocabulary. Like I said, I believe we went through this last time, but it won't hurt to do it again. Bo. Bo means to go in or to enter or to come. Bana is not short for banana. It means to build, or actually he built. Maybe I should say he came, because that's, well, actually that's not going to be right for Bo. If it's going to be he came, the vav would drop out. So I'm just going to say to go in or to enter or to come. So bana is going to be to build. Yalad is to bear children, to give birth. Yareh is to fear. Yarad is to go down. Lakak is to take or receive or grasp. Moot is to die. I would say that is not moot, as we say in English, but it's moot means to die. Nafal means he fell. Nasa, if you think, I know I went over this last time, you think of NASA, lifting the rocket, lifting up off of the launch pad and carrying a satellite in space, to lift or carry. It helps you remember the word nasa. Then avar is to pass over. Allah is to go up. Ahmad is to stand. Kum is to arise. Kara is to call. It's also used to read when they refer to reading something. I guess when you're reading something, you should read it out loud. It'd be that. Seem means to put or set. Shuv means to return. And then we have, those are all verbs. Then we have po, which means here, as opposed to sham, which means there. I don't know whether sham's been in our vocabulary or not, but then rock. Rock is, you just have to look at the context to know whether to go with only or still or something like that. On the next page, 153, we have some additional information on some really, really common verbs. Natan is all over the place. It appears 2,014 times in the Hebrew scriptures. And so really you're going to learn these different forms because you're going to see them so often. Excuse me, occurs 2,014 times. And then Haya is even more common and appears 3,576 times. And so you'll see these often, but even just going down through here, it's not hard to pick out, like, okay, no subformative on the first row. That's third masculine singular. Third feminine, we see kametse, kametse. That doesn't change. Second masculine singular, we see ta and ta. Second feminine singular, we have the tav with a shva or just a tav without a shva. We've been seeing that all evening. On first common singular, we see the T ending. On third common plural, we see the shurik ending. On second masculine plural, we see tem. On second feminine plural, we see ten. And both of those, it could be that they won't have the dagesh, but it's still easy to tell what they are. The one that's a tiny bit tricky would be Netanu, Netanu. And you'll notice that you have a dagesh in the noon. So you have Natan, which has a noon. That dropped out. You have the nu for the subformative, but they put a dagesh in the noon to indicate that the noon from the word dropped out. So that's why it looks the way it does. It's still pronounced nu, Natanu. But if you look at the second column, Haya doesn't end with the noon, and so you don't get the dagesh. You just get the nu from the subformative, just as you get gatal nu. And so it's still easy, even though they kind of change forms, and you just kind of have to get used to. I don't think you have to memorize it. Any of these, you'll get used to them because they're so common. The different forms. On the next page, these are not quite as common. Yare, to be afraid, that only appears 317 times. Moot, to die, that actually is a little bit more common, 845 times. Neither one of those is as many as the previous page. But it's still easy to go through and say no subformative, comets hey, ta, the feminine tav, whether it's got a dagesh or not, t, u, tem, ten, nu. It's easy to see what the person and number is. While we're on this page, this 14.19 is a little difficult to read. I think the first first six lines are all one sentence. Most people don't write like this anymore. This is BB Warfield, and so this is like early 1900s. But it's still worth a read. There's nothing wrong with what he said. You do need to remember that he's talking to, this is something he wrote for people who are in school to become pastors. And so it's addressed to people who are becoming pastors or missionaries. But I think it's still got some good points in it. Like if you go down a little over halfway, you have a line that starts with nothing. I mean, the word nothing. And it says, nothing will suffice for, okay, what is this? This is for tools for ministry. Nothing will suffice for it but to know the book, to know it at first hand, to know it through and through. And I agree with that. Knowing the Bible is, whether you're a pastor or not, it is just imperative to be in God's word. And I just wanted to underscore that. And then a little bit farther down, he talks about, well, let's just keep going. And what is required, first of all, for training men for such ministries, that the book should be given them in its very words, meaning the Hebrew words, the Aramaic words, the Greek words, as it has come from God's hand and the fullness of its meaning. And so I think it's a targeted article for people who are going into ministry, like pastoral ministry or missionary work. But I think it's still good advice for us. And I think it's an encouragement too, that it's important. That's why we're learning Hebrew. That's why we teach Greek, learn Greek too, is to be able to read God's word just as he said it, as it came from his hand, as it were. So I thought it was a good article, but it is a little bit more difficult to read because it's so old. Okay, so homework. if you haven't memorized the call perfect paradigm, whether you use 13.5 or you use the one that I sent out from in first, second, third person order, it was just easier for me. I have to think about it a little bit more if I go on the other one, but the main thing is you memorize it one way or the other. And so work on the vocabulary. Go ahead and finish exercise 14. You may have already done part of it, but we hadn't covered everything. We'll go over the workbook next time. We'll go over the translations next time, like we normally do. We didn't do that today because this is just the second part of our chapter 14. Oh, there's a mistake there. Next week, I'm not doing the 14 labs. The next that one I need to take out of the slide here. This is an old note. And then chapter 15, go ahead and look at the call imperfect strong verbs. And as I said, this is going to be the last big paradigm to memorize. You have to have the call perfect paradigm. You need to have the call imperfect paradigm. And as I said, it's listed in 15.3. So we have 13.5 and 15.3. That's why it's easy for me to remember, because it's just a slight alteration of the numbers. And the perfect paradigm is all suffirmatives. Everything comes at the end. For the imperfect, every one of them has a preformative, something put at the beginning. Half of them have suffirmatives as well, but they're different from the perfect. I mean, it's not like you're going to get them confused. They're different, but this will be the last big one. It's a sad thing that people will take Hebrew and they'll get to about this point and they just go, oh, this is too much. And if they would just hang on and go ahead and memorize the call perfect paradigm and the call imperfect paradigms, after that, it's not that bad. I mean, this is the last probably really, really hard chapter. So, and I shouldn't say really, really hard. It's just a little bit more to memorize. All right. Anybody have any questions? All right. Then we will call it done. Thank you.